Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We hope that you subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, Himalaya, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is coming to us from Malaysia. Her name is Lillian Li, and she'll be telling us all about her new book, House of Koi. Before we invite Lillian in, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Big City Dance. This is a fun book written by our friend Virginia Doherty. Mo Doodle is a country mouse who decides to move to the big city in search of excitement and adventure. Although he finds plenty of fun, he soon realizes that he is homesick and missing his friends. This story is told in bouncing rhyme and rhythm with incorporated dance movements for young listeners and readers. Discover how Mo solves his problems while exploring and living in the big city. Big City Dance is ideal for children 3 years old and older. Joining us right now from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, she is the author of a great new young adult title called House of Koi. Please welcome to the show, Lillian Li. Lillian, how are you?
Doing great. How about you?
I am wonderful. Lillian and I were just having a wonderful conversation. Lillian is back with her family in Malaysia, but she is a student at Boston University. And so, even though right at this moment we're separated by a world, she's on literally on the other side of the world. If it wasn't for the pandemic and the quarantine, she would be 2 or 3 miles away from my home. So we're just marveling at how wonderful and small the world it is. Tell me all about House of Koi, please.
Let's see. I wrote House of Koi like a love letter to my younger self, my kid self, because I realized that growing up I've never read any Malaysian novels. There's always been like Western novels coming into Malaysia, whereas like local fiction has always been pushed back of the store. So I wrote this book when I was reminiscing my childhood. My House of Koi is basically like an auto-fiction. Mm-hmm. So it's half autobiography, half fiction, where there's this girl named Mila, and she is in international high school, like we just talked about. Mm-hmm. And in an international high school, her parents suddenly had to move. And so they placed her to live with her grandmother in Bukit Mertajam, which is like the mainland of Malaysia. So she had to transfer schools. She had to really change her whole life. And the book is just about the language barriers, the relationships with your family, and trying to reconcile with your identity when you move into. She had to transfer back to a Malaysian high school to really trying to find herself again before she had moved into the international high school and became this like international student. Because I feel like it's very different being an international student and being like a student in a local high school.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it absolutely is. We've talked a lot here on the program about my daughter attending an international high school, and mm-hmm. And it is. It's, yeah. Suddenly your friends, a lot of kids, especially if you're growing up in a small town here in the United States, and I imagine the same is true in Canada or London or in many countries, you grow up in a small town, your friends are, all within walking distance of each other, and you've known a lot of friends since you were a kid. When you're attending an international school, suddenly your classmates are from a dozen different countries.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's a wonderful experience. I'm so happy that my daughter was able to experience that. And right now, she has friends from around the world. We've talked about hosting international kids. So we have adopted kids. You know, a lot of the kids who've lived with us, they're spread out around the world right now, and it really is wonderful. To me, it makes you feel more connected with the world. What about you? What do you think?
Definitely. And I think that's why, because this is from my own personal life, I was in a private Malaysian high school, and then I had to transfer suddenly to the only American international high school in my city. So it was a huge change. I suddenly knew people from all over the world, and I feel like it really broadened my perspective instead of just being in this little island. But now I've been in touch with so many other cultures.
It really, it's, and hosting the kids in our home, in addition to getting to know the friends of my daughter, you do get to experience the differences from the different cultures. But also, one of the things that was so wonderful for me is to discover that while the clothing might be different, the language might be different, the food might be different, many of the core values are the same. We all love our families. We all want to be loved. Tell me, a lot of people hear the name Malaysia, and they know that it's a country somewhere, but it's there's especially there are people here in the United States can't find the state of Maine on a map, but Malaysia is a fascinating place. Am I right? There are 1,800 islands that make up Malaysia.
Wow! You've done your research. I don't know from the top of my head, but possibly.
But there's a lot. We're not talking 5 or 6. There's at least 1,000, right?
They're both probably very small. There's touristy places. There's one called Langkawi. We just go scuba diving, snorkeling. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I believe, am I right in saying that there a number of different languages are spoken there?
Mm-hmm.
What are the
that's something I really wanted to incorporate that. So it was a bit hard putting in the book, and so I made sure to write out the language, and then I translate it. So there's Malay, there's Hokkien, there's Chinese, Mandarin, English. Some people can also speak Hindi. Because the three main races in Malaysia is Malay, Chinese, and Indian.
What a fascinating place. I know I have friends on social media from Malaysia, and the pictures that I see on their Instagram or on their Facebook, it really seems like a really dynamic place. Yeah,
and whenever people come over, I think the food is what really makes us stand out.
What if I were to visit Malaysia, what is the first thing I should try?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you come to Penang, which is my hometown, you should try. Okay, are you a fan of spicy food?
Well, I think I am, but there's sometimes when I say that and I get the spicy food, I'm like,
there's different levels.
So I guess for an old guy who grew up in America, I like spicy food.
I think I was going to suggest laksa, which is this spicy noodles with prawns. But my favorite would be wonton mee, which is wonton noodles, wontons in Chinese restaurants with noodles dipped with soy sauce, with some meat. It's really tasty.
That sounds good. One of the things that you mentioned was that in House of Koi, your main character had to move back with her grandmother, and suddenly was faced with a language barrier. I think a lot of people might find that kind of unusual. That, these people are in the same family, but they don't speak the same language.
I think it's a generation issue. I mean, this relationship is also based on my own relationship with my grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
because growing up, when I went to the international school, I was told that I can only speak English only, and they didn't allow Mandarin or Malay. And so my English skills improved, but I suddenly forgot all my Mandarin or my Malay. So when I visit my grandmother on the weekends and she can only speak Mandarin, then it becomes a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not practicing my skills. I only see her maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. So I really learned that language is like a muscle. Like, you need to practice, and if you're out of practice, you'll forget. So I just really wanted to highlight this generation problem and also reprimand myself for forgetting my Mandarin skills, my own birth tongue. Like, what do you call it? Natural tongue?
Different people call it mother tongue. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I know myself when I toured Puerto Rico performing my educational magic show. I went there with I went there basically knowing how to do my show in Spanish, memorized. But I know after touring there 2 or 3 years, my Spanish became very strong. And we don't get down to Puerto Rico that often. And now that it's a muscle that has just atrophied, and I'm right back to that basic level of Spanish that I was 20 years ago. How did that language barrier affect the relationship you had with your grandmother?
It affected a lot. I think because growing up, my parents basically forced me to come visit my grandmother every time. Like, I would say, "Oh, my friend's having a birthday party. Can I go?" And then they would say, "No, you have to make sure you visit your grandmother this weekend." So at a young age, I didn't understand why it was so important that I had to give up going to birthday party to go see my grandmother in like something like the countryside. Like, she lived on top of a mountain. And so I didn't enjoy that and I didn't enjoy struggling to talk to her. We would just sit next to each other, watch a Chinese show, and I would try to pick up some words, or I would just go out and play in the garden, things like that. So really affected, because I didn't know what to tell her, and we only talk like basic things like, have you eaten? What do you want to eat? Do you want to go for a walk? And even in walks, we would just sometimes walk in silence. So I hated it, because I really wanted to know more about my grandmother, but I also didn't know how to make it better. So I think when I came to Boston University, I joined a creative writing class, and then I knew that a short story I wanted to do was with my grandmother. And so I think writing this book just made me reflect on my relationship with her and how things could be better. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm listening, and there's a part of my heart that feels really kind of broken for you, because I had the opposite relationship with my grandmother. She was like one of my best friends. We did all sorts of stuff together. She rode in the back of my motorcycle, and it was awesome. And I'm so sorry that you weren't able to have a deeper relationship with your grandmother. Is your grandmother still with us?
Yeah. It's a bit of a sad story, actually, but a few days before going to print, she had to go to the hospital. So actually, she's been diagnosed with breast cancer I think this was the 3rd time. She survived both times, which was remarkable. And then I guess when the 3rd time hit, it was a bit too much. And so a few days before the book was going to print, and then I heard the news when I was in Boston, and I considered just coming on a plane, coming for the funeral, but then that would, I think, disrupt school, and the plane ticket was expensive. So what I thought I could do for her, I wrote a dedication for the book.
Uh-huh.
And it got into print because luckily I could still get my editors to approve of the added pages. So yeah, I was able to do dedication for her. And I think she knew the book was coming, and my mom has been like showing off to her, telling her. So I think, and we've been video chatting as well. So I think it was good. She knew that this book was really for us. So I'm pretty happy. So.
Well, that's good. So it sounds like you were able to become closer over the years.
Definitely, yeah.
What message did you write to your younger self in House of Koi, and I guess what message would you have for other young people?
I think the message that I wanted to send to myself was not to be so afraid to be myself, because I think when you're placed in a new environment, you feel like you have to suddenly become this person to fit in. And so for me, when I went into the international school, I felt like I suddenly had to be this cool international kid, not like a girl from Malaysia, but someone who has a story to tell as well, someone who's also worthy to talk to. And I think this message that I also want to send to young people out there is that just, I guess it's a bit cliche, but like, be yourself and don't let anyone try to change you. And definitely appreciate the relationships you have with your family and work on the relationship with yourself, because I think that was the main issue for me. So
you know, you said something.
I hope it's not too sad.
No. You said something that was I think really powerful for me. You said, that you had to learn to be yourself and not to try to be this cool kid that you thought you were supposed to be now that you're an international kid, and to understand that you just being yourself, you were worthy to talk to, that you were somebody that was worthy to talk to. I think that's a struggle that a lot of young people face.
Yeah, and I think even at a young age, I think that's when you're most insecure. That's when you're the most influenced by your friends as well. Trying to think of a way that if I could go back in time and tell my younger self how to be more confident, I think I kept a journal. So I suppose that helped a lot, trying to process my thoughts and also maybe give myself some more like self-love instead of focusing on what other people thought about me.
I was going to say, where do you think that feeling of unworthiness that a lot of young people and a lot of older people feel, where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from our own negative thoughts. There's this like part of us that just, it'd be like there's a good side of us and there's a bad side of us, and that bad side is always trying to remind us that there's more bad in us, trying to take over the good that we see in us.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's just our own thoughts. And then once, I think what I had to learn was telling myself like, okay, I'm fine. I don't need anyone to really validate me, or I know that I'm good enough for myself.
And that, I think, is a fantastic message for young people, just to understand. As you were talking about, there's a good part of you and a bad part of you, and that you're inside of you, and you're talking to yourself constantly, and there's this battle. I'm remembering the cartoons when I was a young kid about 100 years ago. And, there would always be these kind of pictures when a character had to make a choice, and there'd be the good angel or the devil speaking in the other side of the ear. And I guess, without the religious connotations, there is this kind of push and pull in us that we're giving ourselves these messages, and sometimes we're constantly listening to the negative thoughts that we're saying to ourselves, and I love that you learned how to pushed those at least to the back and brought the affirmations and brought the good feelings about yourself to the forefront.
Yeah, and I think it's still an ongoing. I think no one can really get to the point of, wow, I'm so amazing. And you shouldn't think you're so, you shouldn't put yourself up so high, but and just an acceptance of yourself is really, really good enough.
Yeah. It's hard for me not to, think of myself as amazing, because I am amazing. But, no. How did you change? How did you grow as you wrote House of Koi?
So I wrote the book when I was in Boston, and then it was just a lot of remembering my childhood and appreciating more about my childhood. And then I had the opportunity to go back home for the summer holidays. And then that was when I really listened a lot more. Like, my parents would be talking with their friends about something, and then I would think, and then I would quickly write it down in a notebook and say, oh, I really got to add that into my story. Like, there's this specific slang, a lot of Malaysians like to add la after their sentences, L-A-H, la. And then, yeah, or there would be like a typical Malaysian story, not really a story, superstition. Like, I mentioned it in my book, but for example, if you're eating rice and you leave a few of the grains of rice on your bowl, and then if you don't eat that, it means that you're leaving pimples for your future spouse. So you're out there somewhere, your soulmate is having pimples because you did not finish this bowl of rice.
I guess we have to make sure
superstitions like that.
Yeah. We have to make sure we take small bowls of rice, and we don't leave any. Well, where can folks? I know right now we can find you in Malaysia, and then next school year, hopefully we'll be able to find you at Boston University. But in the meantime, where can folks connect with Lillian Li online?
Well, you could follow me on Instagram. It's Apple and then Prinx, P-R-I-N-X, short for princess.
Okay.
And you can follow my Amazon. I think Amazon has this bio page where if I'm starting to post anything, you'll be notified. I think those are the two best places to find me.
Excellent, excellent. And the book, House of Koi, is available on Amazon, and it is a great YA title. I think that this would be a really interesting book for parents and young people to read together, to co-read. I think it could generate some really interesting conversations about growing up and give parents a chance to talk a little bit about what it was like when they grew up, and for kids, giving kids an opportunity to ask parents what it was like when they were growing up. And that could really, I think, help open dialogue and be very, very beneficial to their relationships.
Yeah, and you get to learn a lot about Malaysia as well. I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this novel, because I've never seen a Malaysian young adult novel before. And like, you've asked me, where's Malaysia or what is the culture like? I think this book is as much as I could summarize about my culture.
Yeah, and that is, we talk a lot about that with in talking about the picture books and middle grade books that we feature here in the show, that a book is a great way to travel, especially now when we're in our homes and we can't travel. And it, it just gives us a chance to go to other countries, other cultures, meet other people, and I just think it's a fascinating tool for families.
Oh, I also wanted to mention I recently was able to get a few consignment deals for my book to be out in Brookline Booksmith, which is in Coolidge Corner, and Barnes & Noble as well.
Well, that's great. Well, we want to recommend everybody check out House of Koi. It is available on Amazon. We've been speaking to the author, Lillian Li. Lillian, thanks so much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be June Smalls. She'll be telling us about her beautiful new picture book called She Leads. We'll also have a quick visit with our friend Jennifer Swanson, who'll be telling us a little bit about Solve It. Great new series of episodes we are producing with our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM. Don't miss it. That's the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Lillian Li. Be sure to check out House of Koi. I also want to thank my incredible team for all the help they give me putting this together. We'll start with my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. I also want to thank my awesome author ambassador, Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. But most of all, I want to thank you. You are amazing. You're doing a great job teaching your kids, becoming their teacher without any notice. You're entertaining your kids, you're enriching your kids, you're helping keep them safe, while at the same time you're maintaining the house and cooking the food and doing all those other things that you're typically doing. You are amazing. We love you. Thank you so very, very much. And please know that I will be keeping you and your family in my prayers, and I'll be looking for you on the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.